The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the Community Foundation's annual webinar on the responsive grant-making process. I'm Christina Ciociola, Senior Vice President for Grant-Making and Strategy here at the Foundation. The webinar today will be led by Sarah Fabish, who is our Vice President for Grant-Making and Scholarships and the lead staff for all of our competitive grant-making. She will be joined by our staff that supports this process, including Jackie Downing, who's the Program Manager for our grant-making and capacity building, Denise Canning, who is our Grants Manager, and Kara Strawn, who is our Knowledge and Evaluation Officer. You'll get to know their voices as we move through the presentation. The responsive grant process is the Foundation's largest competitive grant-making process and occurs only once per year. This year we have about $1.4 million available to distribute in the first-year requests. And as always, we're expecting the demand to far outweigh the supply of funds. Typically, we receive requests that total 5 times the amount that we have to distribute. So I can't minimize how competitive this process really is. With that in mind, if you're new to the Foundation or have never applied or received a grant before, you may want to call Sarah or Jackie to see if this process makes sense for you as an initial entry point, because there are other entry points available to organizations. I want to take this time to say a couple of words about priorities. We're often asked every year when we start this process, what are the Foundation's priorities in terms of responsive grant making? And I want to be clear that this process is designed to be responsive to the needs in the community and at your organizations, and it's open to all types of requests. With that said, I also want to tell you about some strategic priorities that the Foundation has identified and has also set aside additional funds to support. The Foundation has initiated strategic focus in the areas of incarceration and reentry, as well in the areas of immigration integration. And we have set aside funds to support these two areas, and those funds are separate and apart from the $1.4 million I mentioned that's available in this process. You can read more about those strategies on our website under the tab. We have a new website that you should check out. You'll see some of it today, I think. But under the Leading on Issues tab, if you go in there, you can read more details about the two strategies we're launching, or we launched. We've already done some grant making in both those areas and some non-grant making activities. And as I said, we've set aside funds specific for those two areas to do some more grant making and some more non-grant making activities. For example, we gave a grant to Junta last year under the heading of these strategies, as well as to Transitions Clinic, which works with ex-offenders returning to the community on their health care needs. We've also done some non-grant making activities. Many of you may be familiar with the immigration report we just released recently. So I'm mentioning these priorities because I want to be clear that if you're doing work in these areas and you apply to a grant through this responsive process, it will not eliminate or exclude you from any potential future opportunity that we may have in these two areas, especially as in terms of how grant making is concerned. Some people have raised some questions about that already, so I want to be on the front end of those questions. As I indicated, we will later this year, maybe second or third quarter, be doing some more grant making. I cannot say for sure right now if that's going to be in the form of an RFP or more proactive grant making, but I encourage those of you that are doing work in these two areas to feel free to reach out to me, give me a call outside of this webinar, and I'd be happy to answer your questions and eager to hear about the work that your organization might be doing in these two areas that the Foundation has an interest in. With that said, I'm going to pass this off to Sarah, who's leading the charge today.
I want to give an introduction to the webinar. And as Christina said, I'm Sarah Fabish. I'm Vice President for Grant Making and Scholarships. I manage all the grant making processes here at the Foundation and with the Valley Community Foundation. So welcome to the Grantseeker information webinar. The goals of the webinar are to familiarize you with the responsive grant process at the Foundation. For Greater New Haven, the Valley Community Foundation is our largest grant process, but one of 12 here at the Foundation and at the Valley Community Foundation. A few housekeeping items. The webinar is scheduled to end at 3 p.m. and we will make every effort to end promptly. We ask that everyone in the room turn off their phone and anything else that beeps. because we are recording this and going to put it up on our website. For those participating from your desk, you are able to type in questions that we can view on the screen. This is our only way for you to ask questions since you are muted. For those of you in the room, we ask that you use the index card that's in the middle of the table. We will make every attempt to answer the questions during and after the webinar. There are going to be points throughout the webinar that we're going to stop and answer questions. If we are unable to answer all the questions due to time limitations, we will post answers on the website. If you have any trouble viewing the webinar or with your audio, please call Matt Digby. That's Matt Digby at 203-777-70793. 203-777-7093. If you're having trouble hearing us, you can phone into the webinar instead of using the speakers on your computer. The webinar will be posted on both the Foundation's websites by the end of this week. From these websites, you'll be able to click on all the hyperlinks that you see throughout the presentation to access documents and web pages. But these will also show you how you can do that right through our website as well. So as we're talking about, the foundation was established in 1928, so we're a very old community foundation. We've been around for a long time. It serves the Greater New Haven and the Valley. The Valley Community Foundation was established in 2004 as our philanthropic strategy in the Valley because we wanted to raise additional resources for those communities in particular. And it serves the towns of Ansonia, Derby, Oxford, Shelton, and Seymour. We have approximately 900 funds distributing over $20 million in grants and distributions each in the past few years. And so this responsive grant making process, as you heard from Christina, is a very small piece of the kind of grant making that we do, but it is the largest grant making process and the larger grants and the multi-year grant opportunity. There are multiple ways that the community foundations support not-for-profits, and you'll hear about some of them throughout this presentation, but I encourage you to go to our website, and Denise will talk about those resources in a minute, because they're all on our website. You know that about Give Greater, I hope, and I hope all of you have profiles or are planning to put profiles, and Jackie will talk a little bit more about that. We have designated funds here at the foundation. They give out grants to individual organizations that donors cared about and named specifically, and so we manage those assets, and organizations get annual distributions from that on a regular basis because those donors cared about their operations, so there tend to be general operating support grants. And then we have donor advisors who in fact use Give Greater as a searchable database, particularly during the campaign. You'll hear about that through other mediums here at the foundation, and we have found that they use that to search to their gifts to that process.
This is Denise Canning. We provided you with a slide of sources of information. We have the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven website listed, as well as the Valley Community Foundation website listed. We also have the Nonprofit Management Resource Center. This is actually a page on the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's website, which lists things like how to find a consultant, workshops, how to start your own nonprofit. So we suggest that you peruse that webpage. We have the givegreater.org website. This is, Sarah mentioned it before, this is where nonprofits can go on and create a profile for themselves. It's also a great way for nonprofits to go on that website and find organizations that are possibly doing like work. So you get to know the field and the community that you're working in and what else is happening and who is, for instance, serving youth or providing educational programming. GNHcommunity.org, this is a site that the foundation maintains. It's an opportunity for executive directors to network with each other. There's also an ability to post nonprofit events, job postings. There's actually some blogs on there devoted to some fields of interest such as early child care and resources for nonprofits. Data Haven site, this has statistics and facts about our region. The Greater New Haven Community Index we provided a link for, which provides data and information about the issues and needs of the Greater New Haven community. We suggest that Data Haven and the Community Index be sources of information for you. You'll notice on the application that we're looking for data to support the need of your program. So these are two great resources for you to go on and see if you can use some of that data for your write-up. And also Community Foundation and Valley Foundation staff. So we're available by phone for you to ask any questions, and we suggest that you call any of us if you have any questions about this process or anything else about what the foundation does.
This is Jackie Downing. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you need to do before you apply to the Community Foundation, or actually apply to any foundation or any funding source when you have a particular project or idea that you would like to see funded. You really need to do your research first to understand where you are in the market, who else is providing the services that you're proposing, who likes to fund those kinds of things. So do your research, do a good online search, and as Denise mentioned, givegreater.org is a good source for finding out what other nonprofits are doing similar services and what their success has been. You can also see there who their major funders are, so you can see who's supporting the kind of work that you have in mind. Talk to other people. Talk to the people from those other nonprofits and to people in the community to find out if the project you have in mind is something that is needed within the community. You can also use GiveGreater and those conversations to talk about collaborations and partnerships. Sometimes it makes sense to partner with another organization that's doing some piece of what you're doing and have been doing it well, as opposed to you creating a new program to do the same thing. And sometimes those partnerships don't make sense. Sometimes you have a different idea and you like to move in a different direction. But it's important to know who else is out there and what the opportunities are for collaboration. Analyze the potential funding sources that are available to you by looking at lots of different resources. Foundation Center Online, which is available at the New Haven Public Library, is a great source to go in, put in looking for Seth Godfrey is the librarian there, and you can put into your search that you're looking for funders to do Connecticut and whatever it is that you do in your industry. It will pop up a list of potential funders for you. So it's good to see who the possible funders are. No funder, including the Community Foundation, likes to be the sole source for your project. So it's important to have other partners or other potential partners in the pipeline. And also understand your funder's internal process and their priorities. So make sure you do your research on all of that. Then the first thing you need to do is really define your outcome, your goals, and your measures. I know Carol will talk more about the logic model later. I use that as my outline for preparing a grant. So if you can define what you're doing and your goals, outcomes, and measures early on, then you can really understand what you're looking for in your process. Then you go ahead and structure your program to meet those goals and to meet those outcomes. Then you work out a preliminary budget for the first year and subsequent years if you're proposing a multi-year request. Really make sure that you match everything in your budget with every activity that you have planned. Write an implementation plan. What is it that you're going to do? How are you going to do it? How are you going to spend those dollars? Develop a fundraising strategy that includes private and public funders. So that could be individuals, it could be foundations, it could be government sources. But talk about who the other potential funders might be for your project. Think about how that will work in, and select those funders that you think match the project that you have in mind, and write your proposal.
This is Sarah Favish again. I want to talk to you that we have many grant processes here, which I said at the very beginning, and encourage you to go to our website. Responsive grants is what this webinar is really focused in on, which is our most competitive grant process and the one where you can get multi-year support as well as probably the larger grants. But we do have the Q River Fund, which we're currently looking at a set of 12 applications. If you're doing science on the river, or you're helping to gain access to the Q River, if you're doing recreational activities, if you're doing any kind of campaigns that get people to care about that river. It's one of the dirtiest rivers in Connecticut, and is one of the few rivers in the country that have a fund devoted essentially to it. We do a request for proposal process where that comes out at the end of November, beginning of December, with a due date in January, and review through the month of February with a board making a decision in the spring about which ones are funded. We're currently in the process for the Community Fund for Women and Girls. It spent a year off from doing grant making because it wanted to be more strategic in its grant making, and so we've done a definition about what gender specific means to that fund. Again, that's on our website. I encourage you to look at that. It's too late for this year, but not too late to think about next year. I encourage you to have a conversation with me or Kara if you're interested in that fund, because we can give you guidance, and that's one of the stipulations that the fund had this year, that they asked staff to screen those applications and make sure that they were real possibilities for the fund. And we have about 26 that we're currently looking at right now, and it's very exciting. Then the New Haven Leadership Program, we're in the midst of that. It's an application process by which leaders in the community apply for training. It's a series of training that goes throughout the year. And then once you get the training and you have set up a project that you want to do in your community, there are small grants that are awarded that allow you to implement those projects with the help of your neighbors. And then the Valley Community Grants, which right now they're entertaining applications. There's a March deadline for that. It's intended for small organizations that have a staff of 2 or less, mostly volunteers, again doing projects in the Valley. And then the year-round small grants process and the year-round small grants for project and capacity building. The board raised the upper limit for that pool of funds. For a grant, you can get up to $7,500. Usually the grants are between $2,000 and $5,000. We have been done traditionally a lot of capacity building grants through that. We see that as a way of being more responsive, because you can come in anytime during the year. We try to review those requests within 6 to 8 weeks of receiving them. If you would like a link to the application, which is an online application, you can ask Denise Canning to send you the link. It is intended only for organizations that have an operating budget of $2 million or less. And so it is not intended for larger organizations. It's really intentional for small grants to small organizations. It's an every other year. If you get a grant 1 year, you cannot apply again the next year. You have to get a year off. It's not intended to be a consistent source of funding. But it is many times the way in which new organizations get to know us and for us to get to know them. And if you are not really comfortable in a large grant-making process, you may want to start there. And so we're sharing these other opportunities because you need to figure out whether you're in the right place coming for responsive grant making this year. And then there's the needs and opportunities, which is very similar to our year-round grant process, but it's a Valley-specific grant process. They give up to $10,000 on an annual basis. They look at that. There is no prohibition in terms of budget size or in the number of times you come. It's once a year you can come, but you could come every year. And then both foundations have sponsorships, and that's up to $2,500 for any one event, no more than $2,500 within 1 year. There's an online application you can get access to through either website. And then scholarships. We just put up the scholarships that the foundation here manages up on our website. And so if you have high school students going on to further education and they're looking for support to continue their education, I encourage you to access the applications through our website.
This is Jackie again. I'd like to talk specifically about the responsive grant process, the one here to the big process, the largest competitive process that we have here at the Community Foundation. It's responsive. I will define that for you. Some grant makers have strategies that they put out an RFP, a request for proposal. We respond to any request that comes to us, so that's why it's called the responsive grant process. This year we have about $1.4 million available in first-year money. As we said, you can put in a multi-year request, so we have second and third-year grants that are still going out, but new money going out this year is about $1.4 million. And that is flexible funding. It is really for, although we do have some strategic priorities for in some areas, the majority of our funding is flexible, and it is available to anyone, any organization that serves at least one town in our 20-town region. You can serve outside the region as well, but what we're most interested in is the activity that you do within the 20-town region. You can apply for 1-year or multi-year funding, and you can apply online by going to cfgnh.org. Denise will take us through this process later. You can either come in through the Community Foundation or the Valley Foundation website. All applicants to any of these processes must be a 501c3 organization or have a fiscal sponsor, a partner that they're working with that is a 501c3 that will handle the fiduciary responsibilities for your project. Applicants must also serve one town, as I said, within our 20-town region, at least one town. You must adhere to the policy of non-discrimination. We provide that for you. We provide our policy for you on the website. You just have to have sign off that your board adheres to the same policy. And applicants who are previous grant recipients must have been up to date on all of their reporting requirements. So you will be asked on the application whether your reports are in, and we will double check. And if you are not by the time of the application deadline, you will be ineligible. So you do need to check any reporting requirements that you have outstanding for anything from the last 3 years. Projects that generally do not receive consideration include religious activities, endowment campaigns, lobbying, travel, or previously incurred debt and funding deficits. Those are not considered through our application process. Requests for capital projects, large capital purchases, are limited and will be evaluated as to their ability to enable an organization more significantly to serve its constituency. And as we said, there is $1.4 million in the pool. That includes capital requests. So capital requests that are above and beyond that kind of figure are probably not going to be considered through this process, and we don't really have a portal for those considerations. So think carefully about capital considerations, capital projects.
This is Denise Canning again. The responsive grant process is a two-stage process. We begin with the one application, and the application due date is March 27th. We'll repeat this a lot in this webinar, but that due date is hard and fast. 5 p.m. March 27th is when everything is due. And we have, and Sarah will go over this in detail later on in the webinar, but we have community and staff reviewers that review these applications. They have a score sheet that they use, and the scores are brought to our board of directors in May, and the board, based on scoring and other considerations, decide which applicants are going to be encouraged to the second stage and which organizations will be denied. If you're encouraged to the second stage, then you will have a full review, which includes a site visit in June or July, and questions will be going back and forth between you and your reviewer. In the first stage, it's a read-only process, so we really encourage you to really think about that when you're writing your application. Don't make assumptions that people will know who you are or what you do. Really have to make sure that the reviewer that's reading your application can understand your request and who you are and the impact you have on the community. Typically, we have about between 140 to 176 applications that we receive annually, and approximately 40 to 60% of these applicants are encouraged to go on to the second stage. And here's a timeline for you. Again, the due date, March 27th. The applications are reviewed by the staff and community reviewers in April. The outcome is shared with the board. That's both the Valley Community Foundation Board and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven Board in mid-May, and the decisions are made. So everyone should hear about the decision via email from me by the end of May. And then the full review and the site visits are done in the summer, June and July. We write analyses for the board review, so the board does not see your application. They see an analysis that's written for them, so we spend the summer doing that and early fall. And then the funding decisions are made by the board in September or October. So everyone will hear about the funding decision by the end of October.
And grants are grant active from the day of the vote. So your grant period goes from the day of the vote to the following year.
So the responsive grant process, this is jointly administered by the Valley Community Foundation and the Community Foundation, so there's one door to go into. The applications are on both websites, but there is just one application. And then the reviewers review everything from all the regions. And then after the review, it is split, so the Valley Community Foundation Board takes a look at those scores for those applicants that are applying to serve the Valley communities. And the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven Board looks at the others for the other towns. The judgments of the VCF Board are central to the determinations of these grants awarded to nonprofits and/or all programs that benefit the Valley. And of course, the Valley organizations need to submit an application to be considered for funding through this process. And we thought this would be a good time to stop for questions. So we're going to take a look at if anyone has written any questions. So we have one question. Can you restate the two initiatives the Community Foundation is focusing on this year, please?
So this is Christina. I had mentioned that the Community Foundation has set strategic priorities in the area of incarceration and reentry, as well as in the area of immigration integration. Those two strategic priorities have set-aside funds associated with them that are outside of this responsive grant-making process. I don't want to spend time going into the detail about the two strategies. You can read more about them on our website, or you can certainly give me a call to talk about them more. But as I indicated in my earlier comments, we're going to be doing more grant making in those two areas. If you apply for a grant through the responsive process, which we're talking about today, it does not exclude you or eliminate you from applying for a grant or receiving funds as part of those two strategic initiatives at some point in the future later this year.
Another question is, under the responsive grants, a capacity grant can be for more than 7,500, correct?
Yes, that's right. The responsive grant process, there is no maximum that you can request. If you are looking for 7,500 or less, you will qualify for the year-round small grant program. I would encourage you to go there for that application. But if you're looking for more than 7,500, then your only entry would be through the responsive grant process.
Another question, when will applicants be informed if they are encouraged to move forward? That will be the end of May. Someone is asking, please define lobbying.
Lobbying is if you're being paid to lobby with legislators. So we won't pay for a lobbyist to go to the legislature to lobby on your behalf. That doesn't mean that we will not support information sessions that you might want to have for legislators or breakfasts, or that we have supported policy development and such as that. But, paying for a lobbyist on your behalf to go up and lobby the legislature is not something we will do.
Is there a specific person we can contact to see if our previous reporting requirements are up to date?
Yes, this is Kara Strawn. You may contact me to just confirm that all your reports are in and everything is up to date.
Phone number?
Oh, phone number is 203-777-7079.
If legislators are part of your target audience, is that lobbying?
Not if it's for information and education.
Will these slides be made available for listeners following this webinar? Yes, we're actually recording the webinars, so the webinar will be posted on our website by the end of the month, by the end of the week. If we want to apply for a program related to the immigration initiative, should we apply through the responsive grants process, or will there be another RFP later this year?
There is no separate application process available right now. As I indicated, in the future, we will be doing either an RFP or a more proactive process around our two strategic initiatives. That's not to prevent you, if you're doing work in immigration integration, that's not to prevent you from applying to this process, because our RFP or our grant awards under the strategic focus may be very specific and narrow. So I would urge you actually to call me and we can talk through about some of what you might be thinking.
Another question, if we provide services to all 20 communities, will the application be reviewed by both boards, and will both boards need to approve it for funding?
That's an interesting question. We make that kind of determination here. It needs to have a certain percentage of the Valley communities participating in or benefiting from whatever the services that you're delivering. We make that kind of calculation. But every year there's usually one or two applications that we consider in partnership with the Valley Community Foundation. The two foundations look at it. And yes, both boards have to vote their portion. We take a look at a portion of the grant coming from either of the foundations.
It's very helpful in the application. This is Jackie. It's very helpful in the application if you can articulate what portion of the population you serve is from the Valley region.
And this is our last question before we move on. Is there a limit on number of years you may receive responsive grants or responsive grants?
Typically, the grants are 2 to 3 years. We have considered things on occasion that's been 4 or 5 years, but typically it's a 3-year or 2-year grant.
I think, sir, that question might be around frequency. If you have a responsive grant for 3 years, can you then come back and get another one for the next 3 years?
There's no prohibition to that, but we will be looking at your ability to sustain your activity. So we want to see growth. If you're coming back for another 3-year grant, we want to see growth in your ability to manage your the cost of doing business. So it will be a question. And there have been times, I have to say, that in consideration of opening the door to others, that we may have said no to a second round of support. But if you don't ask, you don't get considered. So if you have a need, we encourage you to come and ask for support.
Okay, this is Jackie. We're moving on now to what's new about the responsive grants process. And the one big feature that's new this year is the budget form guide. In the past, it's been provided in a different format. This year, it will be an Excel file, and we'll go through that later in this webinar. But it will be a fillable Excel file, does its own calculations, and makes it a little bit easier for you. Some of the other things that are new within the last couple of years, because if you've been out of the application process for a couple of years, you may not have been introduced to 3 different application forms in addition to the project program and general operating support grants that we've had since 2008. We introduced 2 years ago a capacity building specific application form, and again, we'll go through that later in the webinar. Also, we refined the questions once again on capacity building and general operating support applications to be reflective of the great information that we have in Give Greater, so that the applications are much less, many fewer questions than in the past, and we rely more on the information that's in the Give Greater profile, because that is required for general operating support and general operating support and capacity building applications. The guiding principles for nonprofits are posted on our website. I cannot stress how important these are. These are the sort of guidelines that the reviewers use to write the analysis that Denise was talking about, and we really use the principles that are outlined there as the guide for our grant making. I'll read through the second paragraph. It is the belief of community foundations that the best use of the community's endowment is to invest in nonprofits that display leadership in addressing issues and seizing opportunities in the community, regularly perform evaluation of their services, and practice sound programmatic and organizational management. That means your leadership, both staff and board, are out and visible in the community, that you are recognized as a leader in your field or an active participant in your field, and what is your leadership doing to set the vision for your organization. Evaluation regularly performed, meaningful evaluation done, and then that feedback used to inform your program as it goes forward. And sound programmatic and organizational management. Do you have proper oversight from your board on your finances? Are they appropriately involved in fundraising and in fiscal management? And do you have a good, diverse funding stream that comes into your organization? The types of applications. There are 3 different types of applications. We'll go through all 3. If you have a question about where your project or program or idea falls in, please call Sarah or Denise or me about where we think your application should fall. The forms are very different. So take a listen today, and if you still have questions, don't hesitate to call us. The project support application is for a new or existing project. It can come from any organization that is either new or has received a grant in the past from either the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven or the Valley Community Foundation. So any nonprofit or one with a fiscal sponsor can come in for project and program support. So for many organizations, it will be the only application that is available to you. The General Operating Support Grant is to further the general mission and work of any organization rather than for a specific purpose. In this application, we don't really want to know what you're doing with the money other than you are fulfilling your mission. And we need to hear very clearly that you have a strategy for that mission and what you're doing in that mission. Only organizations that have been incorporated for at least 5 years and have received a responsive grant from either the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven or the Valley Community Foundation are eligible. You must also, in this case, have a Give Greater org profile. You must have a published profile, and that has to be published by March 27th. The second type of application is a capacity build. The third type of application is the capacity building support. This is defined as short-term financial assistance to build long-term infrastructure improvement. So let me give you an example. If you are hiring a development director to raise more money so you can expand your programming, that is not capacity building. That is an ongoing expense that you will have all the time because you're bringing someone on staff. If you are hiring a consultant to create a fund development plan that your staff and board can then implement, that's a short-term infusion. Hire the consultant comes in, leaves you with a plan, and you run with that. That's capacity building. So that's the time when you use this application. Requests include, but are not limited to, things like board development, strategic planning, evaluation, and capital expenditures, including equipment, building renovation, or relocation. And in this instance also, only organizations that have been incorporated for at least 5 years and have received a responsive grant from either of the foundations are eligible for this. And in this case, you also need a Give Greater profile. The majority of the application is the Give Greater profile.
I think the intention here is that we have found over time that you need to be more of an established organization. That's why there's a 5-year rule. And we also have found that those organizations that have been successful at least once with either the foundations, we know them a little bit better. And so I think we have a better ability to ascertain whether general operating support or capacity building makes sense for them.
Okay, we're going to take a chance to stop there again to see if there are any more questions. Bruce George is the first one. Bruce George.
So a question, please define capital projects further in light of this. Running upgraded computer cabling into a building and upgrading internal computer cabling, is this considered a capital project?
Yes, that would be a capacity building project. It would be a capital project that would come in under capacity building.
Another question, can an organization go for more than one responsive grant during the same grant period?
We encourage you to choose your higher priority. You're competing against yourself, and so people think because there's a variety of 3 applications that maybe they can fill out each one, and we ask you to make a choice. Given the competitive field, when you're talking about 170 potential applications, we're asking you to make a choice, which is the higher priority for you to come to the foundation and to fill out only one application.
You mentioned that an organization needs to have been incorporated for 5 years. Would you qualify for the grant if you have been operating for 8 years, but the first 5 years you were using another organization as a fiscal sponsor and have only had your own tax ID since 2012?
No.
Just to clarify, to receive capacity building support, our organization would have had to receive a responsive grant in the past. That's correct.
Yes, through the responsive process for a capacity building grant, you would have had to have received a responsive grant in the past. Through the year-round small grants program, you can come in under a capacity building application for the lesser amount of money without having received any previous support.
Would a grant be withdrawn if a matching fund source does not materialize?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking in that question. If the idea is that you're coming to the foundation to match a grant, if you could still show that funds will go to that purpose, if you can do it, then that's fine. If you cannot do the project because you don't receive the match, then potentially we've had organizations say to give up the grant, they've withdrawn it. So that's a determination that we look for you to participate in. We don't arbitrarily do that. Our intention that is if we do support you, we try to find ways to allow that support to continue.
Are there any responsive grants available for orgs incorporated for less than 5 years? Yes. Project support. So anyone who is not incorporated for 5 years can come in for a project support grant.
And also any of the other smaller grant processes.
Are organizations with fiscal sponsors limited for the amount they can request in the project support grant?
No, there's no limit. I think that people need to keep in mind that our typical annual grant is between $20,000 and $35,000. Although we have done grants at the higher end when we have a certain source of funds that allow us to do that. But typically our annual grant is between $20,000 and $35,000.
Okay, we're gonna move on. So there are some, the 3 applications that we have, there are some common attachments for the application. So we've listed them here. So each application, regardless if you're project, general operating support, or capacity building, we need a signed statement from the chair of your board of directors on your letterhead that indicates they approve the submission of this application. We also need a signed statement from the chair of your board saying that they agree with our anti-discrimination policy, and that is posted on our website, but you can also click into it through the attachments page of the application. We need your organization's annual operating budget and actual income and expenses for the most recent completed fiscal year, and your organization's annual operating budget and actual year-to-date income and expenses for the current fiscal year. And we also need list of 3 references, not members of your organization, but people in the community that know what you do and know your program well, because if you are encouraged to the second stage, then the reviewers will call your references to have an idea about your program and how you impact the community. We want you to make sure that your references know that they're listed as references and make sure that they read the application, because we've had instances where we've called references and they've had no idea they've been listed or have not read your application. So really make sure before you put those 3 people down that you've given them a chance for number 1 to agree to be a reference and number 2 to have read your application so they're not caught by surprise. There are some additional attachments for the project support application. So we ask your 501c3 that to be sent, or the 501c3 of your fiscal sponsor, the list of your organization's board of directors, the logic model form, which is available on the website as well as on the attachments page of the application, and Carol will bring you through this a little later in the presentation. The budget form guide, and again, is listed on our website as well as the attachments page on the application, and Jackie's going to bring you through that in detail. For the year you are requesting this grant, your organization's projected annual operating budget with this project included, and that's if available, so that's not a required document. Copy of your organization's most recent audited statement, if applicable. We understand that some smaller organizations may not have audits. And copy of your organization's most recent IRS tax form 990. Again, if applicable, we understand, again, if you're a smaller organization, you may not have this. The only additional one for general operating support is a signed Give Greater checklist from your executive director. Jackie went over the fact that that general operating support applicants as well as capacity building applicants need to have a Give Greater profile. And there's certain fields on the Give Greater profile that we need you to pay extra attention to, because the Give Greater profile will be read alongside your application by the reviewers. So we have a checklist that brings you through these fields, and we need your executive director to initial that all these fields have been looked at and really focused on, and overall signed the whole checklist. So that is a required attachment. Again, it's available on the website as well as on the attachments page of the application.
If you need help with that, Stephanie Chung is the individual who helps people with their profiles, and I'm happy to make sure that that's clear for you.
And an additional attachment for the capacity building support. Again, it's a requirement that you have a Give Greater profile that goes hand in hand with your application, so the checklist is required. Also, we need a budget for the cost of the effort, of the capacity building effort. If you're using a consultant, then we ask you to submit the scope of services. Or if your organization is requesting capital support through capacity building, to provide a budget for the capital costs. So those are required documents as well. We were going to stop for questions again. Where we left off. Are the project support grants available over $7,500 or just capacity building?
Let's go back. Let me go back and because there seems to be a little confusion about the processes. We do have the year-round small grants. That's for $7,500 and under. There are two separate applications for those: capacity building and project. That's any time of the year you can come in. This webinar is focusing on the responsive grant processes, which is generally greater than $7,500. The average grants are somewhere between $15,000 and $35,000 for a year in this process. Some are less, some are more, but the majority fall in with that range. And there are three separate applications which you can use to apply for that level of funding, the higher level of funding. And those are the capacity building and general operating support grants and project support grants. So those are any. There is no upper limit. You can take a look at what our giving history is and see what other folks have received from us to get a good sense of where we are, but I'm telling you that the majority of those grants are between $20,000 and $35,000.
Another question. If the program submitting the application is part of a larger organization, do you want budgetary information on the program that is submitting the application, or the whole agency budget that includes many other programs?
Well, the attachments ask for two separate things. They ask for your annual operating budget, which would be the entire operating budget for the whole organization. If you were coming in for a program or for a project application, you are asked for a project budget. So you would be giving us the projected project budget for the coming year or multi-years for that project, as well as the current annual operating budget for your organization as an attachment.
Do you need to have been incorporated for the general operating grant? Yes. So the eligibility requirement to apply for general operating support is that you need to have been incorporated for at least 5 years. Do you have a range for grants made for general operating support, or should we look at your Form 990?
Yeah, I think I just kind of, I think I addressed that. Okay.
Great. So we're going to move on.
We're going on to talk a little more about givegreater.org. This is the community's database on nonprofit organizations. Right now there are about 315 organizations that are profiled on GiveGreater. And if you are requesting general operating support or capacity building support, you will need to create or update your GiveGreater profile before March 27th, before the deadline. If you are awarded a project grant in 2015, that's 2015, you must complete a GiveGreater profile after you have received the grant in order to be in compliance with your terms of grant. If you are interested in completing a Give Grader profile, you can start that with Stephanie Chung. Here is her contact information. As part of the general operating support or capacity building grants, you will have to complete this checklist. Your executive director needs to initial and sign off that all of these pieces are completed, because the profile is actually rather extensive. But once you have it done, it becomes a fabulous resource for your organization. First, it helps you start a good conversation with your board and with your staff, so that if there are things that are unclear or unsaid, it allows you to have those conversations about mission, vision, mission, accomplishments, all of those things that you may not have had the conversation around. It also helps you articulate what your goals are, what your needs are, what your accomplishments are. And it then provides what many of our grantees have found, is that it provides the boilerplate stuff for other grant applications. Once you go into that bank foundation application, they're looking for mission. You've already articulated that on your Give Grader profile. You pick it up, you cut and paste. So it gives you a lot of good resources for your own use. So whether or not you're in this process, I would encourage you to do a Give Grader profile. But as part of this process, you must complete the full application for general operating and capacity building. There are fields that are marked with a green bar as you view them. Those are the ones that you will have to do in order for your application. The profile will have to be published for the public, which means there's some give and take. You may complete something. Stephanie may come back to you with some questions. So don't wait until March 27th to complete the profile. Give yourself and Stephanie some time to review that and make it happen. The checklist highlights the required fields that applicants should pay particular attention to, and as you were cautioned earlier, the first part of this process is read-only. So this is your real chance to articulate what you want our reviewers to know. So make sure you are fully filling out those fields. The checklist also has additional fields which are not required, but that must be completed for the application process. And the checklist then must be signed by the executive director so that we know that you've seen it go, that he or she has seen it go and pass, and that checklist must be uploaded as an attachment.
This is Carrigan. I'll be describing the logic model in a little bit more in detail. So essentially the purpose of the logic model is about foundation developing a results-based culture. And some of the essential things to know, or important to know when completing the logic model, are that they are to be completed for project support applicants only, so that was previously mentioned. The purpose of the logic model is to describe the project and how it operates. It should be read column by column, not left to right, and go into a little bit more detail about that in further slides. The definitions for each of the column headings are on the second and third pages of the actual template, as you'll see. And project applicants should complete the logic model for the specific programs they are requesting funding for. So it's not for your entire organization, it's for that specific project. And I will be available until March 24th to review and provide feedback on draft logic models. And again, my number is 203-777-7079.
I can email.
And, oh, yes, an email as well is kstraun, KSTRAUN@csnh.org. So here you have the blank template of the logic model form. And it's important to note that here's the foundation. We don't use the logic model for as much as an evaluation tool as it is as a tool for you to describe your program succinctly. So again, the logic model should describe the program, how it's designed, and how it operates. And in drafting your program grant application, we actually recommend starting with this form because it provides a really good outline for how you'll write your application. So it's a really good framework and tool to use that way. In addition, we found that in addition to just being a tool for writing your grant application, many grantees found it useful to use in their own plan for their own planning and evaluation purposes, pulling out the logic model their completed logic model on an annual basis to kind of measure up and see where they are and where or how they like to tweak programs. So you'll see that there are 8 sections: the goals, assumptions, target population, inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and outcome measures. And the form is really designed to see how all these different pieces work together. And it really kind of prompts you to look at program effectiveness and ask yourself, does this program have a reasonable chance of achieving its goals? So again, just be mindful that when you're looking at the form, that it's not to be read across, but column by column, so that it's not about aligning each bullet from left to right. And this form, I would say that most logic models, typically one page long, we ask that the limit be no longer than 2 pages in terms of completing them. And that, again, it's about really succinctly describing your program, and that the more detailed information be included in your application, your actual application. So these are the definitions that you'll find on the 2nd and 3rd pages of the logic model template. And I'm actually not going to read through all of this, each of these paragraphs, but we ask that as you're completing the form to refer back to these 2 2nd and 3rd pages of definitions. Yeah, so this is the sample logic model for a particular project. And I'll just go through some of the sections briefly and give examples of what we're looking for with each column. So with the goals section, your goal should be a broad statement about what the program is hoping to achieve. So some examples, just to provide some background, this is a college readiness program that we're using as an example. So some of the broad goals for this project would be improving college access for low-income minority students, or increasing opportunities to engage in structured peer groups that serve as a buffer to adolescent risk. The assumptions are what the program assumes about the environment they're operating in. The thought is to make sure that your assumptions about the environment your program operates in are realistic and that they support your goals and needs. So in most cases, assumptions are about the needs and demands for what your program or who your program is looking to serve. Many times this is based on an assumption, a published theory or research, but it can also be based on your own experience. So as an example of an assumption for this program, you could say students do not have sufficient support to ensure successful matriculation. So that's a need. Another example could be guided peer activities promote social behavior and increase academic outcomes. So that's based on a best practice or your experience within your program. As far as the target population, this is the group that your program wants to reach, change, or influence. And this should be as specific as possible in terms of geography and demographics. You don't want to say that you're reaching everybody. This needs to be well-defined and within reach. And some examples would be 6 cohorts of Amistad Middle School alumni or students in grades 9 through 12. Inputs are simply about the resources required to carry out a program. So that's things like staff, equipment, physical space, just all the indicators that the program has everything it needs to operate. Activities are the actual intervention, so what it is that you plan to do to carry out your program. So examples would be college tours, advising with alumni, or peer group activities. Outputs should tie back to the activities. So these are in answer the question, how much are you going to do? How you will demonstrate the activities that are being carried out. So the number of actual meetings that you plan to have, the number of participants. And this is not something that should be listed numerically, but it's just the indicator of how you're going to show what it is that you've done within your activities column. The outcomes are more specific forms of the goals, and we'll answer the question, how will the target population be better off? What is the change that will occur in the target population? And some examples of this would be participants will effectively navigate their way to a college acceptance and graduation, or participants will go on to attend college. And outcomes are very important from the foundation's perspective because this is really where we get into the nuts and bolts of our monitoring. So it's important that your outcomes be clearly articulated, feasible, connected with goals, and that you should be able to demonstrate and report on them. And again, outcomes are not about numeric targets, but just what you hope to demonstrate through the carrying out of your program. And finally, outcome measures are the list of actual indicators by which you will show program success or impact. So they should answer the question, how will we know we are making progress towards our outcome? And these are actually represented numerically, but we ask that you not, if there isn't an actual baseline, to not include targets. But just using the examples of, say, the percentage of alumni participants that complete high school or the percentage of alumni that maintain a certain GPA, those are how you would show particular outcomes.
So we're going to stop for more questions. So it seems to be just a couple. Will there be access to the PowerPoint after the webinar?
Yes, there's a lot of it.
We hope to have it posted on our website by the end of this week, so you will be able to listen to it right off our website. And another question, so the Give Greater profile is not required prior to applying for a project support grant, but is required once a grant is awarded. Yes, that's true. So if you are applying for project support, the Give Greater profile is not required as a piece of this application. But if you are awarded a grant, then one of your conditions of the terms of grant will be that you create a Give Greater profile.
Okay, we are going on now. This is Jackie, going on now to the new budget form guide. This budget form is to only be completed by project support applicants, although capacity building applicants can use this as a form if they would like for the projects that they're sending in as well. But it is not a required form. It is required for project support applicants as an attachment. This details the total project budget as well as the amount requested and other funding sources, and it also includes in-kind, if applicable, in-kind contributions. So this is what the new budget form looks like. This is the expenditures page. On the expenditures page, you'll see that we have salaries, and it says position A, B, C, D. We ask that you change those titles. Please replace them with the titles that are applicable to your project application. We'd like to know who it is that you're paying with these salaries. So please do feel free to change any of those. In the same token, feel free to change anything under program and administration. If something there doesn't apply to you, but there's something missing, please put that in. This is an Excel file. You can add lines. You can add, don't add columns, but you can add line items as however you'd like to. You don't have to be so detailed to add lots of line items, so please do group things, appropriately. But you can feel free to add if something pertains to you that you'd like to put in there. In the same token, we show something like printing under administration. Printing may also be a direct program cost. You may have a particular, as part of an event or a brochure program. You may be presenting a brochure. You may be printing materials for participants. That may be a direct program expense. So in addition to printing being an overhead administration expense, you may want to show that also under program as a direct program expense. So again, feel free to do that, and you'll have the opportunity to explain that to us on the next page, or 2 pages down. The first column, the second column on this is total project budget, which includes any in-kind contributions. In-kind is defined as not out-of-pocket expenses, but contributions that contribute to the success of the program. So it may be donated space. It may be that someone is supplying food for you. It may be volunteer time. that is significant, not a standard volunteer, but really significant volunteer time that you might want to calculate in there. Include those in your total project cost, because we'd like to see what this total project is going to cost when you complete this within the year. And this is a one-year budget. The second column, we'd like you to pull out for us what the value of those in-kind contributions is, so that we can see where that, what the value is. And the fourth column there is in-kind contributions source. So where are you getting those in-kind contributions from? So this is going to account for all of the income that is in-kind on this page. So the total project expenditures and the in-kind contributions are on this page. The next page is the actual income. We're asking you to put on the first line the requests that you are making of the Community Foundation. We're not asking you to break it out to tell us what we're paying for within your total project, but what are you asking for against your total project budget from the Community Foundation. Then below that, we're asking you to, and again, feel free to change those titles. We'd rather not say Other Grantor 1 and Fundraising Event 2. If you're doing a gala dinner, put in Gala October 15th. Put in what information you can in those headings if they apply to you, and tell us what you expect from that source and what the status is of that. So if you are applying to 4 other foundations for the same project, please list them, what you've applied for, and when you think you're going to get answers from those. As you go through this process, if our reviewers know that you have a pending application that's due in August, if you get through the first stage, we will follow up with you in August to find out whether or not you got that contribution toward the project, so we'll know where you stand. So it's important for us to have all of that information. So we'll ask you for grant sources, we'll ask you for specific fundraisers that are dedicated to this project, not general fundraising for your organization, but anything that is dedicated to this particular project. We don't want your individual donor names, but if part of your annual appeal will be dedicated to this, so it's your general operating support that's going to be dedicated to this, please list that, or you're doing specific solicitation for this program. List that there is a solicitation and this is how much you expect from those donors or have already received. And in that case, let us know whether it's pending or received. Also, tell us about earned income. If you're charging fees or you're charging selling tickets, please let us know what you anticipate or have already received for fees and tickets. And any general operating funds that you are putting toward this program. If your board has committed to making this program happen and it is in your budget for this year and it's there already, please let us know. And anything else that you have as potential income sources, that's what you put onto this page. The budget form guide third page is the narrative of everything that you've just given us. So when you have changed position A to program manager, you're going to tell us that 75% of the program manager that's paid $35,000 a year is an expense toward this budget. Or it could be 100% or it could be 10%. It could be 10% of your executive director because they have direct input to this program. It may be 3 program assistants at $9 an hour for 15 hours a week. So give us the narrative as to how you've come up with those numbers. The same thing with the rest of the expenses under program and under administration. That could be just a flat 10% of the rent for your building that you're charging in administration. That's a valid thing to put in there. Just let us know what that percentage is. So give us the full narrative on that. I'm going to stop there for questions. Do we have any new questions?
I just wanted to point out before we move from the budget form guide that this is an Excel workbook. So for those of you who aren't that familiar with Excel, when you open it up, you'll see the first page on the first sheet. You need to move horizontally through the tabs on this workbook because then you'll find the other sheets. And if you're looking for a multi-year request, you have to keep going beyond, through the tabs because you'll see second year, third year. So if you're not familiar with Excel, you might want to, bring someone in as a, if you have a colleague who is more familiar with Excel to make sure you fill it all in correctly because our reviewers will be getting this budget form guide.
And if you are doing a multi-year request, you do need to fill out a projected budget for as far out as you are requesting.
Okay, we have another question. If some salaries are specific to the program, Should they be in the salaries or the program section?
They should be in the salary section. Only the salaries that are administration should be, like overhead, should be in the administration section. So at the top, the program salaries are the ones that belong in the first salaries heading.
So this is Denise again. I'm going to bring you through the online application. So the applications, as we mentioned before, they're posted on the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's website, as well as the Valley Community Foundation website. They're all the same. Doesn't matter where you go. If you're a Valley organization and you're familiar with the Valley Community Foundation website, by all means go on their website. But it is the same exact application. So we're going to try to get you on the Community Foundation website. So as Christina mentioned earlier, we have a brand new website. We hope it's easier for everyone to navigate. We're really proud of it. And to find where these applications are, this is our home page. You're going to go to Strengthening Nonprofits. You're going to hover over that. It's going to expand, and you're going to click on Grants to Apply For.
And if you have any questions about the technology, Denise is the person to go to. Even if you're going through the Valley Community Foundation website, all applications come to Denise. She downloads all the applications, no matter where they come in.
So you're going to scroll down the Grants to Apply For page, and all these processes that Sarah's been through at the beginning of the webinar are on here. So if you want more information, you can click in. But for our purposes right now, we're going to click into the responsive grant section. And you're going to see a bit about the responsive grant process, as well as how it's split into the general operating support, project support, and capacity building support sections. So under each section is a click here to apply. So I'm going to go ahead and go into one of our applications so everyone can see what it looks like. So I'm going to go into the project support application. So a clue for everyone, too, in terms of the search engine that you use, Internet Explorer and Firefox are the best. Chrome has some difficulties. So I would suggest to everyone not to use Chrome, to use Internet Explorer or Firefox. So once you get in, you're going to get into the sign-in page. And we tried to make some instructions here so everyone would know what to do. So if you are a new applicant, and the definition on this sign-in page of a new applicant is someone who's never applied online before. It's not a new applicant to the responsive grants process, because this is the sign-in page for all our processes. They're all online. So if you've never applied online, you are a new applicant, and you're going to click New Applicant, and it's going to allow you to create an account. It's going to ask you for your email address, and it's going to ask you for a password. The password is something you make up. The system is not assigning you a password, so you're going to make that up. Once you create an account, you're going to receive an automatic email from me that talks about your account is created and your password. So please save that email somewhere so you have your password with you somewhere so you can access it. If you have an account and you forgot your password, you can enter your email address and you can click on Forgot Password. The system is going to send you a password that they've assigned so you can use it to sign in, but then it's going to ask you to change it for something that's more memorable to you instead of whatever they send you. If you have your email and password, yay, you're easy, like what I'm going to do. You can just sign in, enter your password, and you just log in, and you're going to get to the eligibility quiz. So the eligibility quiz contains questions about the eligibility requirements that Jackie went over. So here I am, I want to apply for project support, and it's asking me, are you a tax-exempt organization or do you have a fiscal sponsor? And I'm going to select yes. With this grant, are you providing services in our 20-town region? I'm going to click yes. And then it's asking you about your required reports. Have you submitted all the required reports if you've been a previous recipient of a grant through the responsive grant process within the past 3 years? So I'm going to pretend that I've never gotten a responsive grant. So what I'm going to put because a lot of people ask me this question, is not applicable. Okay? And make sure you really read this question, because some people don't read it through and they'll put no and then they're shut out. So I'm going to submit, and it's going to get me to the application. So the application has several pages, as you can see, and you can move yourself through the application by clicking on the pages at the top or scrolling at the bottom and clicking next. So basically we're asking information about your organization. The fields that are required have the red star, so you have to fill in those fields. If you see an I, it's a help button, so you can click that on and see what we're talking about when we ask for specific information. The fiscal sponsor information, if you are a 501c3 already, you're not going to have a fiscal sponsor. You can see that none of these fields are required. You're just going to move along. Then there's the request information, so we're asking a bit about your request. And evaluation information, that speaks to a little bit about what Kara was talking about in terms of outcomes and measures. You'll see on the bottom that we have save and finish later. I suggest that you save, save, save. If you leave this on and you've done a lot of work and you leave for lunch, the system's going to sign you out. It's going to time you out, I should say. So you want to click Save and Finish Later. Now, when you click Save and Finish Later, what happens with the application is it goes into your account. So you're going to get an automatic email from me that says your application's been saved successfully. To access your saved application, here is your account link. You have to click on that link to get to your account. A lot of people go back into the website and they click on the application that we just did. That means you're clicking on a new application. So people will call me and say, I lost all my data. No, you didn't. You just aren't on your account. So make sure you save that account link, but you'll get it every time you save your application from me. Then we ask for organization details. These text boxes open up, so you're not restricted to this space that you see here. A lot of questions come up here because we look for a lot of demographics in terms of the people that you serve, in terms of the towns, ethnicity and race. Some people call and say, I don't collect that data. And we understand that you don't collect that data, but it is a required field, so what you're going to have to put in is 0. And we suggest here, when you talk about your target population, you really specify your target population in terms of demographics, the geographic reach you have, any other distinct characteristics that your target population may have. Perhaps they are learning disabled or English as a second language, or anything that will help the reviewer know who you are serving, because when they see all those zeros, they're going to question whether you really know who exactly you're serving. And then it brings us to the attachment page. So we went over the attachments that are required, and they're all here. And you can see that you can hyperlink into the anti-discrimination policy, the logic model, the budget form guide. I'm going to show you exactly how to upload these attachments, because we have a drop-down menu here that has every attachment. So there are some questions sometimes people call because they don't move the drop-down menu and then they upload everything. Well, the system's not smart enough to read your file name. The system's only reading this drop-down menu title. So what the system is seeing is that you've uploaded the 501c3 8 times. So you really have to use this drop-down menu and logically go item by item. So I'm going to click on my 501c3. I'm going to browse through my network. I'm going to upload, and there you go. And it's going to start uploading up here, so you'll see what you've uploaded. Then I'm going to go to my next one. I'm going to do the approval of submission. I'm going to do the same thing. Browse and find it, upload it. You'll see it up here. So we, just slowly go through the whole process to make sure you've got everything, because if you don't have everything uploaded in terms of how the system's reading it, you won't be able to submit. And Sarah and I have had calls of desperation at 5:05 saying, I just can't upload my attachments. So, it would be good if you thought about these attachments ahead of time, upload it as much as you could before you before you submitted the application, so you're not in a situation where you're having problems with this submission. So again, if you have any questions, you can just call me and I'll help you through it. You can also print out the application here, and you can also email it to a colleague. So if you're working with your finance department, for instance, for some of the financial pieces, you can email them a copy and they can work on it with you. At the end, when you're ready, you can click Review and Submit, and it's going to bring you through the whole application so you can re-look at what you did and see if you want to change anything. Once you've done that, when you scroll to the very bottom of the page, you're going to see a Submit button, and you're going to click Submit. Once you submit, you're going to get an email from me that says you have submitted it successfully. Make sure you get that email. Some people get the email that says they saved it successfully and they think they've submitted it. But that is not submitting it, that is saving it. So make sure you get a confirmation email from me that says your application has been submitted successfully. And we just provided you the login screen, a picture of it, so you can see it and see the instructions.
So how are these applications reviewed once we get them in? You submitted them successfully on March 27th or before. We select community and staff reviewers. Invariably, we have about 52 reviewers every year as the numbers of applications have gotten larger. And because we are asking for the full application up front, it's much meatier than it used to be for our reviewers to read. So each application is read by 3 reviewers, and it's a read-only application. Nobody will be calling you up with questions or asking follow-up, so you really need to be thorough in making sure all the answers that somebody might have are in the application. Community reviewers are representative of the region, both in gender, age, ethnicity, background. Included among them are volunteers in the Community Foundation's leadership initiative, past grantees, current donors, representatives from area funders, and subject matter experts or other community representatives. I've been very lucky. I have a number of reviewers that have been with me for 5 to 8 years, so they're very seasoned. We do have some people ask me all the time about whether their applications will be reviewed by somebody who knows something in that issue area, and we do try to match that. There are some that are randomly sampled because we do want interesting reviews, and this has really opened up the process. We have, new voices every year to this process, and gives us a perspective that we otherwise might not have if we were looking at these alone. All reviewers, as I said, are asked to disclose. The next one. They're asked to talk about whatever affiliations they have with not-for-profits in order to avoid conflicts which would impact the reviewer's objectivity. So anybody who is currently applying for an application wouldn't be able to be a reviewer. So it is something that you might want to consider being in your life. At one time when Jackie worked for a not-for-profit and they weren't submitting an application, Jackie was a reviewer for me, and she writes grants. And so it was a good perspective to see what a funder is thinking about, and particularly encourage people to think about that and put that in life. We are open to that as long as you're not in the application pool when you're asking to do that. Each application, I said, is read by at least 3 reviewers and scored using the application merit score sheet. Those merit score sheets are on the website. I encourage you to look at those. You may even want to score yourself after you finish the application or close to finishing it, because it might give you a sense of where you might need to be a little bit more robust in your application. The reviewers are asked to score these within the context of the whole, so they need to read the application in the whole. But there are certain questions that give them a clue of how they might score that. First and foremost, it needs to be meritorious. We are looking for meritorious proposals, things that meet a real need in the community. You don't have to be unique. You don't have to do something new. It could be your consistent program that you're doing in the community and you need an infusion of some support. Many times people think that they have to have a new idea or a new program to come to the foundation. That's just not true. It can be because you need support to continue to do the good work that you're doing, but we need to know what it is. You know, what difference are you making to our community? You could be outside of our region, you could be an organization outside of our region, but serving the population in our 20 towns. It doesn't have to be all 20 towns, it could be one town, it could be a number of towns, but we need to see, we're very place-based. We are concerned only about the 20 communities that we service. You may be doing wonderful things outside that area, but we are concerned about the population. Now, you could be doing, somebody was asking about policy development. We have supported organizations that are doing policy development on a statewide basis, but they need to show us that our population is being benefited by the policy work that they're doing on a statewide level. We need to see that application. And so all scores are shared with our board of directors to help them decide which applicants are encouraged or discouraged. And so we give them the results of the scoring. We do debrief that with all our reviewers because we want input from them about those that might not have scored well but still deserve some looking at. And so we many times recommend to the board maybe an application or two that may not score well, but we think because of the subject area and the reach. And so we are looking for a geographical reach. We are looking for an issue reach in the selections that go to their board and recommending for considerations go to the second level. Our board has the ability to pull an application, whether it's scored well or not, and encourage to go forward. So they have input, both boards of directors have input about who goes forward in this review process. It's not just the reviewers who are making those suggestions or recommendations, but our board has the final say about who goes forward.
So in terms of completing the evaluation part of your application and thinking about program design in your organization as a whole, it's important to note that the foundation views itself as a learning organization and that we don't look at evaluation in a punitive sense, but it's more so about constant improvement, and so we also encourage nonprofits to do that as well. So through your own self-assessment and evaluation, look at ways in which you can continuously improve your programs and services. We ask that evaluation be integrated into your planning and not something that's done just to satisfy grant requirements. So that's something that should be thought about throughout the year. And in terms of evaluation, we acknowledge that organizations have different levels of capacity, and so we're very flexible in terms of the different frameworks that you can use to carry out your evaluation. So for general operating support and capacity building support, we want to hear more about how broad of an impact, or broadly impact your organization has, and give us examples of what success would look like. In applying for project support, it's important in evaluation to really refer back to the logic model and build those components into your evaluation framework. So in terms of describing your evaluation, we just ask that you describe in detail what methods you'll use to evaluate success and really to give examples of what progress will look like. And to describe your project by putting your goals, activities, outcomes, measures all into the logic model. So the evaluation piece and the logic model piece should really be in sync. In terms of grant recipients, if you are awarded funding by the Community Foundation, we would ask that you submit an annual report in the fall of each year, or in the fall for one-year grants, in the fall of each year for multi-year grants. And if you become a grant recipient, we'll also ask that you complete your Give Greater profile, of course, for general operating and capacity building grants. Our applications, you're required to complete the Give Greater profile prior to, or as part of your submission. But if it is a project grant, we ask that you complete a Give Greater profile in connection with the reporting requirements at the end of that first-year term. And if it is a multi-year grant, then subsequent years of funding are contingent on completing that report and completing a gift grader profile.
So here are some resources for responsive grants. So basically everyone that you've heard in this room you can call. So we provided phone numbers and email addresses for everyone as well. And Stephanie Chung, she is the one that you want to call for any gift grader questions. For those of you who are needing to do a gift grader profile for your application, or for those of you that are not going to submit an application but want to do a gift grader profile, then please call Stephanie. Here's her phone number and email address as well.
And in addition to those personal resources, there are certainly the websites of the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and the Valley Community Foundation, and this slide will provide those links for you. You can go directly there to see what other types of grants have been made, to see also on the Nonprofit Management Resource Center, there's a lot of information about grantors that are, other grantors that are available, about successful grant applications, so you can look at the resources on the organizational resources and links page under fundraising that may give you some of those. We also have a couple of workshops coming up that may be of interest to you. We have done Grant Writing 101 as a workshop. We've done a couple of those sessions in the last couple of weeks. We have something called Nuts and Bolts for Responsive Grants coming up on February 18th. In the morning, we'll be doing that at the Derby Public Library, and in the afternoon, we'll be doing that here at the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. The session in the Valley will include information on the Community Grants Program as well as the Needs and Opportunities Grants Program. In New Haven and the Valley, we will do the 3 responsive grant applications: project support, general operating support, and capacity building support. We go one by one through the applications, look at the questions, and say, this is what the question says, and this is the kind of answer that we're looking for. These are the elements that are in a successful answer. We'll go through the score sheets and see how they work and how they relate to the applications. We'll go through the logic model and through the budget form guide and really do a hands-on workshop in looking specifically at these applications. And we do them in sort of descending order of interest. So we'll do the community grants and needs and opportunities grants first in the Valley. We will then, in New Haven, start with the project application, because the majority of applications will probably come in under project. So we'll look at that first. And if that applied to you and you feel like leaving the room, you can leave after that one, and then we will go on to general operating support, and then the last one that we will do is capacity building. So, and because so many of the questions are similar, we go through those later ones faster, but those nuts and bolts sessions can really give you some insight as to what we're looking for in the answers and how best to craft those. You have time between now and then to take a look at the application and develop some questions on your own, and we're happy to answer those. And then on March 4th, we'll be doing Grant Writing 201. This is a deeper dive. This is not specific to Community Foundation applications. This is a general grant writing class. It's a deeper dive on how to mine data. We have Data Haven coming in to do a presentation for us on how to take your interest area, your industry, and find relevant data, not only on their site, but other sites that can give you information. We'll also be looking at sample questions and sample answers and really dissecting them. We'll have a chance to do some practical work. We'll give you some questions, ask you to answer the questions, and then have a chance to go through what's making an answer successful and what is missing from an answer. So we'll be doing that. Valerie Knight-Ganji, the program officer from the Valley Community Foundation, and I will be teaching that along with Mary Buchanan from Data Haven. That registration is online on our website as well, on the Nonprofit Management Resource Center workshop page, and we hope to see you there.
We really encourage you to think about sharing your application with someone who might be one step removed from your organization, because many times we kind of read between the lines and we make assumptions about what people's knowledge might be, and I would encourage you not to do that, to really be very explicit in your answers to the questions, and to have somebody, as I said, one step removed, maybe review your application so that they can say, from a more objective perspective, you know, I think you need to answer a little bit more. I think your answer is missing this or this piece. And we found that to be really helpful to organizations. It's a practice that we use here internally. Many times we write things, but we share it broadly within a team that provides perspective and asks us hard questions and keeps drilling us down until we do the best job we can in writing something. And I think that that's a really good practice. And so plan for that. Make some time in your schedule in writing this grant application that gives you a chance to have somebody look at this and review it and give you some really helpful feedback because this is a read-only process. I really encourage you not to be discouraged because, as you saw, half people are not going to make it through the process, and I have a mantra that no is never no forever. And we have organizations. We did a guidance session in the Valley, and as I was leaving, a woman stopped me and said, you know, you told me not to give up. And the third time, I was able to get a grant. So the first 2 times were unsuccessful. We do give feedback. We schedule about 3 weeks after the decision about who goes forward or not forward in the second stage. Between Jackie, Denise, and I, we schedule conversations with organizations because you want to know what your strengths were, so we want you to hold on to those strengths. And then we talk about what the weaknesses or the challenges were in reviewing your application, where you could strengthen it, and help give you a realistic view about how you could come back to the foundation if you resolve some of those things. So don't get discouraged. Anybody who's been in a competitive process knows that we can't say yes to everybody. But I can say, since we've been around since 1928, that we've probably touched every single organization in our region in some way. And we are one of the few sources of flexible dollars. That's why the competition is so stiff here.
So we're going to finish up with some other questions. First question, are you saying you need to see other funding sources for a capacity building grant request too?
Yes, you should show other funding sources. Again, we are probably not going to be the sole source for any project. So we have to see that there are other grantors or other funding sources that are working on the project, partnering with us.
Someone who I was on the phone with yesterday about Google Chrome wanted me again to remind people that Google Chrome is not something you should be using as a browser when completing the application. So remember Internet Explorer or Firefox. Another question, should we create a new account if a previous staff member of our organization was the account holder? So the best way to do that is to call me, and I can transfer the user account to you or to someone else in your organization. You can create a new account, but what happens is the history of all the applications that you submitted as an organization gets lost, so you don't have the history. Remember, the account should be for the org, not for a person. So give me a call, and I can transfer the account to someone else, and you can create a new password for yourself. You can just click that forgot password if you don't have the person's password. So I would recommend that.
You're going to want to see your history. If you've applied to the foundation before, many times it's helpful to take a look at the applications that you've done before, and you can even draw from them.
Okay. We talked at the beginning of the webinar about the other ways that the Community Foundation is a resource to the community and how we work with nonprofits. The responsive grant process is certainly only one of those ways. Sarah told us about all of the other grant processes that are here, but we do offer a lot of other services. I talked about workshops that are coming up. In addition to those that I mentioned, we have a lot more workshops coming up this year. We have asking for money. We're doing this in the evening for boards and staff members to talk about now that we're prepared, we've identified our prospects, how do we actually get that meeting? What do we say there, and then how do we follow it up? So we're doing an how do I ask for money workshop. We're also doing a marketing workshop, how to create a marketing plan for your organization that is mindful of the human and financial resources that are realistic within your organization. And we're partnering that with social media. So once you've developed this marketing plan, how then do you actually use the social media? And we're timing that along with a workshop for Give Greater on how to prepare for the Great Give. The Great Give is our 36-hour giving event, which will happen from 8 a.m. on May 5th until 8 p.m. on May 6th. In 36 hours last year, we put about $750,000 into the community through that work for many, many nonprofits that had Give Greater profiles. This year, we'll be doing that event again. We have a workshop coming up on February 24th that will have some of those organizations, large and small, all volunteer and well-staffed, who were extremely successful in last year's campaign, and the innovative ideas that they had that they brought to the table. So you'll get information about that through your email. We hope that you will attend that workshop as well as participate in the Great Give.
So this is the end of our webinar. Thank you for participating. As a reminder, the webinar will be posted on our website along with the questions and answers by the end of this week. If you have any questions about today's webinar or you would like some guidance on which application to complete, please call me, Sarah Favish, or Jackie Downing, or Denise Canning.
Mm-hmm.